Greetings, ghosts and ghouls, gather round, take a seat. This October I give you no tricks, but instead a treat. A far off forgotten from my long, long ago. A film quite rotten, remarkably so. Join me in looking back on this TV treasure that once blessed my youth with so much pleasure. An experience I recall unlike any other. Tonight we gather for Scary Godmother. On October 1st, 2004, Cartoon Network aired Scary Godmother, Halloween Spooktacular, a Canadian computer-animated children's comedy based on a series of books of the same name by Jill Thompson. The short film had been created over a year prior by a Vancouver-based animation company known as Mainframe Entertainment. If you're as old as I am, that name may stand out, as they were also the company behind the original television series of Reboot. And if you are old enough to remember Reboot, then I'm sorry. Sorry because we're old now, and extra sorry because Reboot looked like this. While my mother assures me that I was a fan of Reboot, I honestly remember it far less than a lot of the other animated escapades of the 3D cartoon eras. But Ugly Martian somehow comes to mind long before images of Reboot. However, what my constant head trauma has yet to rob me of is memories of my youth around Halloween. Specifically, of all the 3D nightmares to be formed and blasted in front of my young eyes, this one in particular sticks in my memory so strongly. Likely because nearly every October for as long as I can remember, I can recall turning on Cartoon Network, and every single year, multiple times over the course of the month, I would sit down to watch Scary Godmother, The Revenge of Jimmy. Wait, I've seen The Revenge of Jimmy, Scary Godmother's sequel, more times than I can ever possibly hope to count, but I'm realizing I may have never actually sat down and watched the original. I do recall my assumption as a kid, knowing I was missing something in the legacy of Scary Godmother, but honestly, I expected at some point they would air the first one and I'd finally get some proper context, but I guess that never happened? Was it just that I missed when it aired? Or maybe they really didn't re-up the first film? I'm not sure, honestly. It doesn't matter, because tonight you've stepped foot onto the property of the hairiest Hare. And on this special episode of Hare's Haunting Hour, I plan to dive in head first, observe this little film with an eldritch eye, and fill in the gaps missing in the story of Scary Godmother. Scary Godmother is an incredibly small and charming story about a little girl named Hannah, the picture of innocence who was left in the care of a group of older and far less caring kids on Halloween night. Daryl, Katie, Bert, and most importantly, Hannah's cousin, Jimmy. The film starts off with an absolutely incredible establishing shot of the town with all kinds of characters walking around being completely normal. Nothing strange or particularly interesting about this scene at all. Definitely no reason to say more words about it, so that I can show as much of this scene as humanly possible. We're introduced to our characters who are arriving at their predetermined meeting place, the graveyard. If there's anything I adore about October and all of the cartoon Halloween specials, it's the many tropes that they all use and reuse ad nauseum. And that's not sarcasm, I mean it. Keep the tropes coming, I'm here for them every single time. They fill me with childish joy. Daryl meets with Katie first. Katie is rocking a pretty common costume of the time, a black cat equipped with the black painted on whiskers and nose. Meanwhile, Daryl expresses his more individualistic yet simple-minded personality by coming dressed as a piece of candy.
Daryl, are you a piece of candy? Yeah, cool, huh?
I think the word dressed is a bit of a stretch here, as it's just an oversized wrapper on top of an everyday attire, though he seems very proud of it, implying that this wasn't just some low-effort attempt. He genuinely thought, I want to be a piece of candy, and by golly, he made it happen. Bert rolls in next. Not satisfied with being a nondescript baseball player, Bert has equipped himself with a cardboard SUV, decked out with lights, a laser cannon, and a pretty inventive glove compartment. Bert's introduction displays him as an agent of chaos, and every scene he's in reinforces this.
Let me roll down the window. Ah, that's better. That's one vote for everyone. I demand a recount. That's still one vote for everyone. Recount! That's one vote for everyone. Recount!
What are you doing? Nobody has changed their vote.
I just want to see how long he'll keep this up.
Oh.
Recount!
Jimmy calls out to his friends in an overly cocky manner and stands atop a gravestone. Emphasis is put on how he sees himself as above the others. Everything from his facial expressions, a low camera angle, his disregard for human burial courtesies, and most noticeably, his costume. Jimmy is sporting the latest in lazy teenager going trick-or-treating design. A red hoodie with devil horns, red sweatpants to match, and finally, some red Converse. In my youth, I had met many people like Jimmy, and I detested them. Teens unwilling to put in the effort to make a costume but still expecting the spoils of a hard night of trick-or-treating. And that's something that's bizarrely brilliant about Jimmy's design. I'm very unsure whether this design choice is intentional in its provocation of those feelings within me or not. When compared to those around him, Jimmy's costume isn't the most uninspired thing in the world. Like I said, Daryl's is pretty nothing overall, but there's still something to it. There was still some sort of effort put into the creation. Katie's is pretty bland and honestly so common, but I definitely knew a lot of young girls who genuinely wanted to do the black cat costume. Not as a last-minute decision, but as a conscious choice. At the very minimum, Katie applied the whiskers and nose and kept the cat ears on, so that's gotta count for something. And then with Bert, I mean, come on. Bert's on another level. Jimmy's cruddy little sweat jumper outfit doesn't even deserve to be in the same conversation. So when Jimmy is the one to suggest they formulate a plan to go out and acquire all kinds of candy, that initially rubs me some kind of wrong way. But lagging a little behind Jimmy comes Hannah. Her introduction into our tale is awkward, fumbling over a fallen gravestone in the shape of the Washington Monument. She slowly climbs over it, sliding down, but the music that accompanies her is soft, kind to the ear. Music composition in this movie is extremely interesting, something I honestly wouldn't have expected to say about a 2003 lower-level animation project. Robert Buckley is the composer, and he manages to squeeze out a lot of creative pieces that harken back to titles like The Addams Family and The Munsters, while occasionally throwing in music that never feels out of place on a simple animated special. So before we even see Hannah's face, the moment after her name is uttered and we hear her speak, the music changes and informs us that she is an essence of innocence to counter our otherwise unruly bunch. Emphasizing this further is her costume of choice, a fairy princess. Thankfully, in our introduction to Hannah, we are also presented with the fact that while Jimmy sees her as a burden on tonight's festivities, the rest of the cast is actually very pleasant with her. To explain why Hannah is here, the gang end up performing a strange flashback sequence where Daryl and Katie act as Hannah's parents as they prepare to send her away. This scene's purpose is interestingly useful in two ways. Firstly, it gives us more time with these goofy characters, establishing them and their antics while also reusing assets in the most clever and inventive ways I think I've ever seen. The graveyard is still our setting while making it appear vaguely similar to a living room. And with our friends playing the roles of the parents, we have no need to spend the time, energy, yada yada to create two more models when they're only going to be needed for this one scene. The second purpose of this random bit is to heavily establish Hannah's one grand fear. While she is scared of plenty of things overall, like an average small child, Hannah is desperately afraid of monsters. The Monstars. Her actual parents have given her iconic flashlight with the assurance that it can keep the monsters away. Now, let's not beat around the bush here. While I've done nothing more than present to you what appears in this film, none of this character work is layered on as thick as I'm making it seem. In typical early aughts fashion, we zoom through most of this stuff in a brief several minutes, which is a good thing, considering that as integral as these characters are, I'm not watching Scary Godmother for Jimmy. Speaking of the devil, Jimmy convinces his crew rather quickly that having Hannah tag along with them is going to slow them down, keep them from all the good candy. In order to ditch her, Jimmy enacts another great Halloween special trope: send the scaredy cat into the abandoned house. Inside the house, Jimmy flashes convincing mind-bending finger puppets, each foreshadowing a character we'll soon meet. Hannah runs in to complete her task of throwing candy into the basement, while the older kids cruelly hold the front door shut. As out of character as it may seem for the others to go along with Jimmy's sick game, they each share one quality that Jimmy uses to his advantage. They're all very stupid. As Hannah cries, scared and alone in this abandoned house, something appears from out of the dark. the Scary Godmother. Scary Godmother is characterized by her spooky vibes and optimism. Her character design is a chaotic, witchy vibe that surprisingly retained quite a bit of itself from page to 3D. Purple and green striped leggings, purple goblin heels, little bat wings on her back, and most importantly, a chaotic mess of a gothic tutu, mirroring that of Hannah's. She approaches Hannah to cheer her up and show her there's nothing to be scared of. And after Hannah calms down, Scary Godmother offers to take her to the Fright Side. Fright Side is another beloved trope, the one where life currently sucks for our main character, so we need to whisk her away to somewhere distant. Somewhere a little scary, very different, but seemingly better. Places such as Wonderland, Halloween Town, the Land of Oz, the Otherworld, Halloween Town. That reminds me, I found it really interesting that this film, based off of the incredibly stylistic watercolor works of Jill Thompson, decided to go for a less tested medium like 3D animation. It would have been so nice to have seen the possibilities this short movie could have had with a more faithful approach. A nice 2D animation in the style of Thompson's books would have likely stood out just as much as this psychedelic nonsense. Perhaps more interesting than the what ifs, however, is the clarification of why this style was chosen, and more so, who made that call. It was Thompson herself. Jill Thompson, as a fan of stop-motion animation, had been inspired by Nightmare Before Christmas and encouraged Mainframe Entertainment to stick to their guns with 3D animation. For better or for worse, I think there's something there to be appreciated about a creator willing to give creative liberties with their work like that. So as Hannah rides into Fright Side on a psychedelic broom ride, remember to take it all in with a newfound appreciation. It's Halloween, and so, naturally, Scary Godmother reveals that she's throwing a little house party tonight, and the guests may soon be arriving. So, of course, I have another round of characters to introduce to you. There's Scully Pettibone, Scary Godmother's gay roommate, a delightful bone brother with a dashing flavor added by his stereotypical, yet still entertaining voice acting.
You're staying for the party, aren't you?
Yes.
Oh, well, good.
His characterization isn't all that fleshed out, but honestly, Scully is just one of those characters that doesn't really need it. You kinda get his gimmick right away. Add him to your list of favorite pun-loving skeletons. First to arrive is Hare, the Wolfman. Hare is by far the most characterized of our cast, carried by both his incredible performance and theatrical animations. Calling Hare theatrical is fitting, considering most of his bit is that he's an actor, an artiste, and a super fan. However, his most defined characteristic is that he can't resist the call of a good treat. Greedy, somewhat repulsive, yet still endearing to the adult eye. I like Hare more than most, though that's probably more so based on the fact that he's got a lot more charm than most characters, even if that charm is typically played as that of a vile cretin. Our next esteemed guests are the vampire family of Count Max, Countess Ruby, and their son Orson. From what we're given here, this family of vampires are famous, are royal even. King, queen, and prince of the night. Big stuff going on tonight in the Gary Sodmother. Big stuff going on tonight in the Scary Godmother abode. The Count is characterized as ancient, his design purposefully giving the vibes of a Nosferatu look. Taking this concept and running with it, Max's main character beat is that he's old, traditional in standards, yet insistent on his need to prove he can be hip and trendy, obviously struggling to keep that appearance believable. The Countess is just a little more on that hip side, or maybe she's just the more grounded parent, able to recognize that trying to keep up isn't worth the embarrassment. Speaking of embarrassment, Orson is our most relatable character of the bunch, with his main gimmick being somewhere between getting embarrassed by his father and meeting a mortal for the first time. He interrogates Hannah on all of her mundane traits and clashes against them with his bizarre vampire ones.
Do you sleep in a coffin?
Sure, I've slept in my own coffin since I was 3. You mean you still share a coffin with your parents?
No! Yes. I don't sleep in a coffin at all.
You're homeless?
It's a simple trope, but it's played so well here that there's really no criticism I can throw its way. It really reminds me of the many encounters I had as a kid. Being one of only a few kids at some adult-oriented party and just clicking with the other kids, even when we have so little in common. If it wasn't clear that Hare is an unlikable mooch before, the appearance of the Count is the real tipping point, as he pesters the family enough for Max to use his hypnotic spell to put Hare into a sleep stasis for the majority of the party. I personally adore the way Harry's eyelids aren't able to cover his eyes completely. This was such a common thing with early 3D animation, so it's just nostalgic in the most hideous way. Finally, our last arrival springs forth from the basement, the horrifying monstrosity that goes by the name Bugaboo. Bugaboo, naturally, frightens Hannah, who runs from him in a quick chase scene, ending with Hannah unleashing her ultimate weapon, the flashlight. Of course, it doesn't do anything, and Hannah bemoans Bugaboo's existence.
Take that!
What are you, a coal miner?
Bugaboo, despite his appearance, is a monster with sweet, uncle-like qualities. A deep voice providing simple, observational jokes and a layer of sensitivity that ends up allowing Hannah to look past her prejudices and give the big guy a shot. With that being said, that's everyone. Time to get the party started, which means it's time for some bizarre dance sequences, reminiscent of maybe like 70s dance sequences? Where have I seen something like this? Scooby-Doo? Austin Powers? I don't know. Either way, it's killer stuff. An enjoyable sequence still to this day. While we're being introduced to our list of ludicrous guests, the camera cuts back to our world, where the teens are sitting around waiting for the part where Hannah comes running out screaming and wants to go home, which I guess doesn't fully make sense considering they held the door shut when she had attempted to do just that. Regardless, they're already beginning to regret their actions considering A, Hannah still hasn't come out and Halloween night is chug-a-lugging towards a close, and B, the whole point was to convince Hannah to go home so they could get some serious candy bagging done, and now here they are with no candy while other kids have already raked in the sugary spoils. After enough time, the kids crack, fearful of what could lie inside the house, but more fearful of the punishment for losing Hannah in said abandoned house. They have only one option. This film is pretty much a simple bottle episode with characters we've never met before. It remains simple, focusing on nothing but characters, introducing them, and then watching how those characters interact with each other. For this reason, we cut back to the big kids multiple times without ever really progressing their plot forward. Meanwhile, at the party, most scenes consist of small discussions and simple moments with, yet again, no major plot progression outside of Hannah slowly learning that maybe monsters aren't all that bad. The plot doesn't progress much because honestly, there is no plot to really progress. In many instances, this could be an opportunity for criticism. In the average adventure where characters talk and end up going nowhere, it would be easy to classify as a waste of time. Depending on who you ask, this one could just as easily be characterized as that waste of time, but I'm shocked, after all these years, to find myself thoroughly captivated by the moment-to-moment pace of it all. Jokes are landing, characters are charactering, and the pace of swapping back and forth between the real world and Fright Side, despite the limited assets, feels refreshing. It's simple, but refreshing.
$200 in pizza?
Sure, 12 extra larges at $16 each. Of course, you could
But after some pizza is ordered and our chilling compatriots scarf it down, Hannah bonding with Bugaboo a little more over their favorite pizza, the time has finally come. Let's get somewhere with this plot, shall we? Hannah, at multiple points, has laid out the many nasty lies that Jimmy has told her about monsters, always painting them as villains, but also clearly attempting to scare and control Hannah. Somehow, the pieces align themselves and Scary Godmother seems to have realized the situation they have at hand. With a huddle and a whisper, the gang gathers to formulate a plan of sorts. The big kids finally have to act, fearfully entering the abandoned home together, only to find it's not so abandoned.
Who the heck are you? What are you doing here?
Darling, stop me if you've heard this one. 4 naughty kids walk into a spook house.
And?
What then? And we eat them, of course!
The Fright Side gang scares and tricks the kids into entering the basement where Bugaboo lies for the finale. The kids have met their fate, about to be eaten in the basement they condemned an innocent little girl to. But then, what's that? A shining beacon of hope? Hannah has arrived, flashlight in hand to defeat the monster and save the night. A concentrated effort of overacting concludes our tale, making Hannah a hero to the kids. Scary Godmother passes her a key to Fright Side. We threaten Harry for a final time. Credits roll. With all that done and over with, How do I feel about it with many, many years between myself and my initial interaction with Scary Godmother? Well, for starters, upon viewing it, I'm starting to realize that maybe I have seen this short film. Despite the multitude of times I know for a fact I've seen its sequel, I was convinced that I had never seen this one. But as one scene surprisingly flowed into the next, I realized that perhaps I have caught this once or twice before, and it just never stood out to me the same way. That's all good and great, but what about the actual experience? How do I feel about Scary Godmother through the lens of an adult now far removed from Cartoon Network's constant airings? Let's set the mood and get into it. Yeah.
Now it's Scary Godmother. Then it's Yu-Gi-Oh! This is Cartoon Network.
Scary Godmother in nearly every facet impressed me to a degree I hadn't expected. When the joint first got rolling, I truly feared for it and myself. The animation looked janky, character models looked frightening in the worst way, and honestly, I just feared for that layer of forgotten early aughts cringe to crush me upon viewing. What I got instead was a fanciful foray into a friendly field of frights and delights. Scary Godmother, despite its very aged and at times hideous visuals, managed to still impress me in many areas. Once I looked past some of my anti-biases towards 3D animation, I realized that this movie has so much style and charm in it that really added to the experience overall. The setting of Fright Side is filled with so many cozy oddities, everything from the outside ride to get to Scary Godmother's house to the interior design of the home. Just look at some of these charming oddities. I found myself captivated by things like the soft glow of the hanging paper lanterns, and even a bucket of firewood by the fireplace. It's always the little things with me, and in this case, I find no difference. That being said, the animation at times lends itself to be incredibly charming, perfectly nailing that Nightmare Before Christmas look that Thompson had mentioned. Other times, though, I find it completely misses the mark. I'm aware that this is early animation jank, and honestly, if you look at Mainframe's other work, Scary Godmother is an incredible improvement. However, at some point, I do have to throw the criticism out there. It's just kinda ugly. And sometimes that ugliness really adds to the feel, but sometimes it massively outweighs some of the charm. On another hand, the characters top to bottom are overwhelmingly impressive. From visual designs to the little things that help in characterizing them, each member of our cast feels unique and stands out as, at the very least, memorable. Voice acting, by the way, stellar. Everyone that lends their vocal cords to bringing these characters to life really gave it their all, and I think it shows. In a short animated children's film like this, it'd be easy to phone it in and not give too much care to their performances. Scary Godmother has charm oozing out of every line from every character, adding even more bonus points onto the film in total and making it an easy watch no matter the age range or interest. The atmosphere of the film is minuscule in scope, but it's made up for with environmental design that even at its most basic still has so much spooky Halloween flair. I can easily see why I clung to this movie as my October background noise for so many years. It sets and nails the tone perfectly. It somehow reminds me of the times when I trick-or-treated while also inspiring me to throw an adult-oriented Halloween shindig. It's pretty, even when it's hideous. Thompson intentionally referred to the Addams family when creating Scary Godmother. She wished to put to page the friendly and inviting aura that characters like the Addams bring to the horror-adjacent genre. This twisted friendliness shines through every character as well as the overall plot itself. While I don't know that it's necessarily the most clear message in the world, I think it really lended to my love of this month in many ways I subconsciously cannot detect. Halloween time is filled with spooky sights and unfriendly frights, yet it also has this dark appeal to it. This little twinge that each of us as children or adults often look for a taste of in life. Scary Godmother manages to capture that image and that feeling that comes alongside the season and jam-packs it into the container that is this film. At the end of our haunted hour, I think I draw my conclusion on Scary Godmother to be a shockingly simple surprise. It's not going to set the world ablaze, but its charm did surprise me in just how much of an impression it left on me. It is, amongst many reasons, why I love this month so much. Even if it wasn't directly to blame, it does certainly embody the traits and characteristics I like most. It's representative of what the month of horror has to offer, and it's indicative of everything we're aiming to display here. Overall, I think I'll carry this movie with me for the rest of all time, and every time October rolls around, my mind will always harken back to sitting in front of that television, turning on Cartoon Network, and having the guarantee that if it's October, Scary Godmother would grace us with her presence once more. And so for that reason, I think every October I will continue the tradition, and I will be watching Scary Godmother every single year. And with this, I bid you farewell. Return to whence you came, and I'll see you back here when you're prepared. Next time you bring the snacks, I'll bring the scares. Maybe this time next year, we'll take a look at this sequel I keep hyping up and see if it has any ground to stand on. For now, I bid you adieu. Catch you in the shadows. Be excellent to each other.